Welcome back to Mr. JDM. I am Mr. JDM, and in today's video we're going to finish up the Sludge Accord. It is a 2001 Honda Accord EX sedan. It's got the F23A1 VTEC engine, and we've been working on this for quite some time. If you watched the first episode, then you know that it was full of sludge. We cleaned it out the best we can, and we're going to run ATF through the engine a couple times and try to flush out what I did not get cleaned out, because I only cleaned the head. The bottom end I did not even touch. You know, it is what it is. Hopefully there is no damage to the bearings, because this thing was full of sludge. But so far we've got all the intake stuff reconnected. We got the thermostat housing and all that bolted up, and the thermostat in there, the hose reconnected. We got the VTEC solenoid reconnected. I would recommend to install the VTEC solenoid on the head before you drop the head, because it was a major pain to tighten this down with the head already installed. Maybe if you remove the EGR valve, it'll be a lot easier to get to the bolts, but I still struggled with the one at the very bottom down here, and so I would recommend just installing it before you put the head back on. We got the exhaust and everything hooked up. Pretty much everything up underneath is done, except for, of course, the knock sensor, because I had noticed that the knock sensor was just like split apart and barely hanging there. And you know what, I very well could have done that, but I am really careful about disconnecting plugs and whatnot. But the plastic on the bottom of this is just so fragile that it probably would have broke eventually if I didn't do it. I mean, not saying that I did, I very well could have, but who knows. But anyway, the knock sensor will be here Wednesday, because at the dealer it was like over 200 bucks. At AutoZone or O'Reilly's it was like a little over 100, and on Amazon it's $10.99. If you need a new knock sensor, buy it on Amazon. The cover that goes over the flywheel, we need to finish getting that installed, but that's the only thing that's up underneath that we need to get, except for this bracket. This bracket goes to the back of the block and up onto the top of the intake, or the bottom of the intake manifold. But we're going to do this once we get the knock sensor, just because this is kind of in the way. So we'll take care of that when we get the knock sensor. Now we are at the point where we want to set the timing. It's really quite simple. On the gear, you can see this little indentation, and then up here you see an arrow. Those need to match up. And then on the cam gear, there is a label that says up, and then I don't know if you can see it, but over here you see this little notch. There's one on the other side of the cam gear, and those have to match up with basically the top of the head here, or the top of this plastic piece. You want those to run even with the top of the head, and then you can put your belt on and your timing is set. It's really quite easy. And you have to do your timing belt before you can set the timing on the balance rods. On all Hondas that are over a 2 liter, they will have balance rods, and what that does is it balances out the engine from any vibrations. You got one over here and one over here, and you can see it has like a notch right here. This one has a notch up here, and there are spots that you have to line those up to, and then you can put the belt on. But right now we're going to set the timing. This will probably take me a couple times, because sometimes the notches will become unaligned as you're trying to put the belt on. So you always want to go back and make sure the timing is set correctly after you've installed the belt. Alright, so we're going to set the timing. We need to get the tensioner belts, or the tensioner pulleys, on there. This is the timing tensioner. It goes up in there like this, and the spring connects to this hole right there, that small one at the bottom. There's a little hole right here. There's a little nub on the engine block that this thing goes onto. I don't know if you can see it, but it's right there. And so we put that up there, All right, we got the tensioner on there. So now we're gonna put the balance tensioner up there so we can make sure it all stays in place while we set the timing. All right, we got it up there, and I didn't tighten it down because you still want it to move up and down a little bit. Now we get the timing set. You'll see on the crank gear, there's a little nub right there. It's kind of dark. It's like an overcast day, so. But then on the oil pump, you got this arrow. Those two need to line directly together. And then on the cam gear, there is a mark that says up. So obviously that goes up. And then on the edge, there's like a little mark here, and then there's one on the other side. Those need to be level with the top of the head. Now the timing belt goes down, around, up, over the pulley on this side, and then around the top and under the water pump gear, and then up to the cam gear. So we're going to do that real quick. All right, so you can see the belt goes down around the bottom of the crank gear, and you can't see the tensioner from up here, but it goes over the tensioner and then under the water pump gear, which is this right here. And then when you pull it up onto the belt, you want to slide this side on first because the slack will be on this side. And then there we go. That is how you put the timing belt on. But now we have to tension it because there's all kinds of play in the belt. There and over here. So what we're going to do is we're going to put the crank bolt in. We'll tap it a few times with the impact just to make sure it's tight. Now we're going to turn it counterclockwise to put tension on the belt. You're supposed to do it like 3 teeth, but right there is all you need. Now we're going to turn it counterclockwise, because now all your slack is on the tensioner side and this side's tight. So now you can push the tensioner up, and you see how that pulls the belt up and tightens it. The tensioner up, and you see how that pulls the, and now we can tighten the tensioner. All right, and now you see there's no play over here and about the same amount of play over here. And then up top, no play and no play. So now the timing is set. We're gonna rotate it 3 times to make sure that the timing marks still line up. But this time we're gonna do it clockwise because that's the way the engine rotates. Now you might ask why I'm gonna do it 3 times, because it's clearly lined up here. But when you go up here, the cam is facing downward and it rotates 3 times. The crank does for every 1 time the cam does. All right, so we got that lined up, and then we got our up, and we'll check the marks on the side. All right, everything is lined up now. So now we got to do the balancing rods. Those have to be in a certain time. If you watch this, when I turn it, it'll turn back itself. It's because it's got a counterweight inside there. And then this also has a gear. So every, I believe it's 3 times. For every 3 times this turns, the counterbalance shaft only turns once. Now in order to line this one up, you got this little mark right here, and then there's a divot. And then up top, there you can kind of see it, there's a mark up here, right there. That has to line up with that. that divot right there will line up to that. But the cool thing about this is we can lock it in place. On the back side here, right behind this part, there's a bolt right there. We can unscrew that and then stick a bolt through there, a longer bolt, and it will lock this into place. All right, so now we have this bolt right here that's pushed into that hole. It's a pretty long bolt, and you can see all the gunk in there, the sludge. But you just push it in there and it will lock the gear from turning. So now we need to remove this so we can get the crank balance pulley put on there, and then we can get the belt slid on. All right, we have our crank balance pulley on, and we need to get this one set up straight now. This one has to be aligned as well. So you see that little nipple right there, and then that mark, those two have to line up. But then there's also marks on the top. All right, see those two marks and that little divot in the shaft? Those have to line up, and then you can put your belt on. All right, so this is our balance belt. As you can see, it's a Gates, and then the old one is a Honda one, and you can also see the Gates logo. So Honda uses Gates belts. This thing costs like an arm and a leg because it says Honda on it, and you get it from the dealer. This one is the exact same belt, and it's way cheaper. All right, we got it on there, and our timing marks are off, so I gotta take it off and redo it. All right, we got it set up there correctly, but now we gotta do our tensioner. But we released it so our tension on our timing belt is also loose. So we're gonna push up on the timing belt tensioner and push down on the balance rod tensioner. So basically, take your thumb, put it up underneath there and push up, and then these fingers are on top up here pushing down. Now I'm pretty sure under the directions it says to turn this crank pulley, or the balancer crank pulley, like 3 notches until the belt's tight, but I mean it's tight, and so I just push down on that and push up on the timing belt, and all that is still tight. We're good to go. And you don't want to forget to pull this out and put that belt, or put that bolt back in there. And here's the bolt. And you don't have to over tighten this thing. I mean, I'm going to tighten enough to where oil is not going to leak out of it. All right, so next we need to put this thing on and our 2 springs. All right, here's something else you want to do is, you see a flat spot right there? You got to make sure that's facing upwards into the other direction, so we can get this thing on there. So let me re-loosen that and adjust it. All right, so we got it up there, and the screw for this has like a little spacer in there, and that's up there, so this thing can still be tight but still pivot. All right, so the spring was a major pain in the ass. You see one side's smaller, one side's bigger. The small side goes into this hole, and what you got to do is you got to get it on the back side, and then that's the wrong way. Wait till my loud ass neighbor leaves. God, it sounds like shit. Anyway, so you take the small side, you get it from behind, you clip it in there, and then put the top on that little pin. But the problem is there's not a lot of room for this. It has to go up underneath behind here, and this was in the way. So what I did was I bent this forward, I stuck this in there, and then I bent it back. It was a major pain in the ass. I probably should have done it before I put the belts on. So think ahead and put the spring on there first before you put the belt on. You can see the spring right there. And this piece is still kind of bent a little bit, but it does nothing. I don't even know what it's for. Alright, so the next thing we're going to do is put the harmonic balancer on, tighten it down, put the alternator belt on, and we're going to add oil and start her up just to make sure it starts and it runs okay. Alright, so I went ahead and put the radiator in, got the power steering pump in here. It's not tightened down, there's no belts or nothing. Got the distributor, the valve cover, upper radiator hose. I didn't record any of it just because, you know, it's the same shit that I did when I took it off, just in reverse. One thing about this radiator though, the fitment isn't all that great because it screws in here but not here. So, but it's tight, it's sturdy. We're gonna add a quart of transmission fluid, ATF, and then the rest with oil. Hopefully nothing's leaking. Alright, so we got everything connected up. We got the distributor, all the plugs, we got the alternator, the belt. Let's see if she fires up. Alright, so she fired right up. Perfect. That means the timing's all set correctly and I don't hear any vacuum leaks. Of course, we don't have the knock sensor just yet, but we'll get that tomorrow, I think. Look at all that gross nastiness. It's got to be from the heater core, because I flushed the system out with the exception of the heater core. Alright, well, we're going to let her run for about 20 minutes. Hopefully that ATF will flush out the oil system, and then we're going to drain the oil and fill it back up and do it again. So the weird thing is there's no engine light, even though there's no knock sensor installed. It's not even clipped in, nothing. Alright, so I ate dinner and it got dark, so I'm going to end this video here. But the car runs, it doesn't overheat, everything seems to be good. You know, I do need to put the timing cover back on, and I'm going to do a valve lash adjustment just because it sounds kind of chatty. So we'll take care of that, and I probably should do it anyway since I had the whole head apart. But I'm going to go ahead and end this series right here. The car runs, it runs pretty good. I'm not going to record the valve lash or put in the timing cover back on just because, you know, you've seen me do it before and there's no point in recording it again. Plus I can get it done a lot quicker when I don't have to record it. But you know, unless there's something weird, like, you know, when I drain the oil it's full of chunks or something like that, then, you know, I'll record that. But anyway, I guess I'm going to end it here, and I appreciate you all watching. Thanks for hanging out, and I hope to see you all in the next video.